I pissed off the black community. I definitely pissed off the black community, and it is what it is. I don't know what you want me to tell you. But apparently I'm educated. So let's go through why I said what I said in that video, because I stand 10 toes down on it. Back in the 1600s, black people, specifically Africans, were not just stolen. They were sold off by other Africans. At that time, slavery wasn't really a term or a thing. They had indentured servants. These servants had time limits of how long they were going to be working. So after these 3 years, you're free to go. And honestly, truthfully, a lot of these men and women chose to become indentured servants because it wasn't a forever thing, it wasn't a long thing, and they would be able to freely come into America. Not saying that it was right. I'm just saying some of these men and women did go by choice so they could leave their home country. Most of the people that were put into servitude, it was for a few reasons. It could have been they were captured and sold off, they could have committed a crime, or they were indebted to somebody. They owed someone something. Now, what I said in my video was that black people created slavery. They started slavery. What I didn't specify was that and I clarified this in the comments immediately after uploading, but just not in the video specifically, but before this drama took place. I clarified it right when I put up the video. But I was talking about in the US, not the entire world, because that predates, what, 10,000 years? I was not getting into all that. So I was talking about here at home. That is because of Anthony Johnson, who back in the 1620s was a servant, not a slave, a servant. So eventually when he was done with his servitude, he was given his freedom. And this man accumulated so much money. He was making so much money that he ended up purchasing a bunch of land. Now he accumulated over 200 acres of land over that time, and he also accumulated about 15 to 16 slaves, 6 or 7 of them being African American and the rest being white. Or, I'm sorry, servants, not slaves. Now things went awry a few years later, around 1653, I think, one of those, where one of his servants, last name of Kaser or Kasser, left because he claimed that his servitude was up and expired, so he left to go work for a different owner. Anthony Johnson then brought it to court and sued that family to have Kasser be returned to him. After a couple of years through the Virginia court system, they actually went in Johnson's favor and brought Kasser back to Anthony Johnson, claiming him as a slave for life, thus creating slavery, legal slavery, not servitude, legal slavery here in America. It was because of Anthony Johnson, who was a black man. Every single background and origin on the planet has been oppressed or enslaved or servants at some point in time. White race did not invent slavery, but they were the race that ended it. It wasn't even a race issue when it was first created. It was a class issue. As I say in many, many other videos, if I missed anything or forgot anything or didn't know something, feel free to comment it below. I don't care. I'm always open to conversation. I love talking about this kind of stuff. But for tens of thousands of black people to get up in my comments daily and call me uneducated or God knows what else, yet not one of them actually is doing the educating, how do you expect people to learn if you are unapproachable and mean?
Oh, okay. That was something. But you said you wanted to be educated, right? I mean, that's what you said. So come on in and hurry up because you didn't already miss too many classes as it is. Let's jump right in, shall we? And start with the fact that you didn't just miss a few details here. What you did was build an entire argument on half-truths and then acted confused when people reacted. And I took a look at your page because I was trying to understand the voice that you're speaking from. And it's clear to me that you try to present yourself as someone who tells hard truths, as someone who leans into uncomfortable conversations that other people might avoid. But what you said wasn't controversial, it wasn't bold, it was incorrect. And what really stood out to me is how you tried to frame it as confidence, opening with, "I'm standing 10 toes down," which is ironic because your first instinct was to borrow language rooted in black culture, while speaking negatively about black commenters just to make your point feel more solid than it actually was. But I digress. Because the way you ended the video told a completely different story. You said, "Educate me. Hey, I love these conversations. Don't just get on here and be mean." But your words and your delivery are completely incongruent. Your tone is defensive, and there's a level of condescension in how you speak, followed by a pivot into victimhood the moment people respond. That's not standing 10 toes down. That's you realizing that the response wasn't what you expected, so you're trying to soften the impact. If you really loved these conversations, right? If you actually wanted to learn and teach others, you wouldn't speak in that level of arrogance to the very people whose ancestors were impacted by over 400 years of this brutal history. And those people, by the way, have every right to feel emotional about it. The real question is, why are you? So this isn't about people being mean. It's about you speaking boldly on something that you're not fully informed on, and then asking for softness the moment that you're corrected. Now let's get into your claims, because this is where things really start to fall apart, okay? You first say that you didn't want to get into the slavery that existed outside of America because it was too much and it went too far back. But then you brought it up multiple times, but only when it supported your point. So which is it? Is it too much to get into, or is it something that you're comfortable using when it helps your argument? Because you can't selectively pull from a broader history to support your point and then ignore that same history when it complicates it. You reached outside of America to say that Africans sold Africans and that slavery existed before it became racial. And I already know that your next move will say, well, that wasn't real slavery, it was indentured servitude. But if that's the case, then you can't use it to support your argument in the first place. Either it counts as part of the history or it doesn't. Because the moment you pull from that broader timeline, you also then have to acknowledge that systems of enslavement existed long before America, which effectively means that Black Americans could not have created it as you claim. The real truth is that no one race or group invented slavery or back then indentured servitude. It shows up independently across multiple civilizations thousands of years before America even existed. So you can't have it both ways. Either we stay within the context of American slavery or we include the full global history. But the moment you open that door, your entire argument collapses. So we'll focus on American slavery. Next, your entire argument hinges on the idea that Anthony Johnson, a Black man, won a court case in 1655, and somehow that means that Black people created slavery in America. Yes, he was a Black man who won a court case, but using that to claim Black people created slavery completely ignores the fact that the legal framework, the court systems, and the power structures making that ruling possible were already being built and controlled by white colonial authorities. That case didn't create the system, it operated within a system that was already taking shape. If anything, it honestly just shows how the colonies were already shifting toward lifetime servitude and how those courts were willing to enforce it. One case inside of a system does not equal authorship of the system. And what you completely fail to mention are cases like John Punch in 1640, 15 years before your Anthony Johnson example. He was a black man sentenced to lifetime servitude while the white men with him only received extended contracts. That's one of the earliest legal distinctions between black and white labor in the colonies. That's the foundation of racial slavery, not Anthony Johnson. You then go on to say that slavery wasn't about race, it was about class. And yes, early on there were systems that looked like that. But in America, it was intentionally transformed into something else. Laws were put into place to make blackness synonymous with enslavement. And that didn't just happen because one black man won a court case. This required legislation. It required court rulings, plural, policies that were written, enforced, and expanded over time. Make no mistake, this was a system that had to be codified, built piece by piece, decision by decision, until blackness itself became the condition for lifelong, inheritable enslavement. That was not accidental, and it wasn't created in a single moment, but it was constructed here in the colonies by white power structures. You also brought up that all races were enslaved at one point. And yes, different groups experienced forms of enslavement throughout history. But the way you're using that point makes it seem like you're trying to equalize these experiences, and they're not the same, not even close. What was built in America wasn't just another version of what existed before. The scale, the permanence, and the racialization of it were fundamentally different. So collapsing all of that into everyone experienced slavery doesn't clarify anything. It actually just erases the horrific reality of what actually happened. And saying white people didn't invent slavery, but they ended it, while completely ignoring who built, expanded, and profited from this system becomes even more misleading when you actually look at what was created here. Because while forms of slavery existed before, the racial hereditary system of chattel slavery in America was constructed and formalized and enforced by European colonial authorities. And that wasn't incidental, it was strategically engineered. So you don't get to erase who built the system and then turn around and take credit for ending it. So no, black people did not invent slavery. But you know what black people did invent though? The technologies that led to the Wi-Fi you abused to come on here and stand 10 toes down on and miseducate people with. Lastly, I saw your comments and this whole no one is educating me, everyone's just being mean narrative. People are correcting you. You're just not engaging with the corrections. Instead, you're deflecting and defending the original take. This isn't about people being unapproachable. It's about you speaking confidently on a topic that requires more depth than a few surface level facts. If you actually want the conversation, then start with the full history and stop trying to shape it to fit the narrative that you want to push. Because the audacity to speak this confidently and this dismissively on a topic like this, while being incomplete in your understanding, is exactly why people are correcting you.